Okay, Pixar, you've put these toys through the ringer God knows how many times. What have you got up your sleeves this time, you bloody sadists? Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to another episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, Woody, Buzz and the rest of the gang are back for another adventure in Toy Story 4. This movie is set a couple of years after the events of Toy Story 3. The toys are all adapting to their new owner Bonnie, voiced by Madeline McGraw, who's just created her new friend Forky, voiced by Tony Hale. And he's going through quite an existential crisis. He believes himself to be trash, and continuously tries to throw himself in the trash whenever he gets the opportunity. When Bonnie and her parents, voiced by Laurie Allen and Jay Hernandez, go on a road trip, Woody, voiced once again by Tom Hanks, takes on the task of showing Forky the values of being a toy and trying to stop him from throwing himself away. However, Woody and Forky end up on their own adventure as Woody reunites with old flame Bo Peep, voiced by Annie Potts, and Forky is abducted by the treacherous antique doll Gabby Gabby, voiced by Christina Hendricks, prompting Woody, Bo and Buzz, voiced once again by Tim Allen, along with Bo's sidekick Giggle McDimples, voiced by Ali Paki, the Canadian stuntman Duke Kaboom, voiced by Keanu Reeves, and the literally inseparable plush toy duo Ducky and Bunny, voiced by Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele, to carry out a daring rescue, all while Woody is once again faced with the age-old dilemma of whether or not to go back to his owner. It's been almost 25 years since Pixar first changed the face of animation with 1995's Toy Story, a film that not only endures as a timeless classic to this very day, and not only launched Pixar to superstardom, but it also led to the creation of one of the greatest film trilogies of all time, with two superb sequels that not only equaled the quality of the original, but also surpassed it in many ways. I mean, I'm not kidding whenever I say it's genuinely very difficult for me to decide which of these three movies is my personal favourites. I adore the first film for its simplicity and lovable but flawed characters. It's a very tight film at only 80 minutes, and yet within its short running time, it manages to pack in so much excitement, so much depth, so much heart, and so much humour. And I'd even go so far as to say that it's one of the few films of my generation that is genuinely timeless. Toy Story 2 does a wonderful job at continuing the story and introducing new challenges and characters, and Toy Story 3 is an absolutely fantastic conclusion to the franchise. Or at least it was. An absolute roller coaster ride that expanded upon the ideas set out in the previous installments to create a poignant, funny, exciting, and at times gut-wrenching and terrifying film that easily ranks as one of the best films of the 2010s in my opinion. So with all that in mind, I think it's fair to say that I am a really big fan of the Toy Story franchise. I hold these first three films very near and dear to my heart, and I think they're not only fantastic movies, they're important movies. Like, they're movies that needed to exist, that needed to happen for us to get to where we are today. And with Toy Story 3 wrapping up the trilogy as beautifully as it did, I was admittedly quite uncertain about the prospect of another film. It's very easy and very understandable for anyone to go into this movie expecting it to be a cynical attempt to capitalise on the name, and I was looking forward to it in the same way that I was looking forward to Finding Dory. I wasn't quite sure what to make of its existence, but I was still confident that Pixar would, at the very least, put out an enjoyable nostalgia trip. Nevertheless, I am admittedly a little bit grateful that Pixar does seem to be moving away from making sequels because, while I have enjoyed most of their sequels, especially the likes of Finding Dory and Incredibles 2, I do kind of miss seeing Pixar put out original films, you know, stuff like Up and Inside Out and WALL-E, and I'm really looking forward to their slate for 2020 with Onward and Soul. But getting back to Toy Story 4, I get why there is quite a lot of doubt circling around this particular installment. It does seem like it is kind of cynical to make a fourth movie after the third one ended the franchise on such a strong note. But at the same time, Tim Allen has gone on record as saying that he couldn't even get through the last scene and has likened the movie to Infinity War of all things. Okay, does it end with half the universe being snapped out of existence? Does it end with Lotso or Woody or Buzz getting the Infinity Gauntlet and doing this and snapping out half the toys in existence? That's certainly one way to top Toy Story 3. That definitely piqued my interest. I mean, we've already seen the toys coming this close to dying in a fiery inferno. What could possibly top their near-death experiences in the last film? Well, I'm not telling you. You're just gonna have to watch the movie to find out, which if you haven't, do see it, because this movie is really damn good. Against all the odds, I think Pixar has delivered another very strong addition to the Toy Story franchise. Is it the best in the series? Not quite. I do think it falls short of 1, 2, and 3 just slightly. And I will agree with anyone who says it's the weakest of the 4 films, but it's still really great in its own right. I mean, one of the reasons why I think we love the Toy Story franchise to begin with, and why Pixar has come back to it so many times, is its characters. The characters in Toy Story are easily some of the best ever put to film. Lovable, flawed, funny, and very close to reality, even though they're toys that come to life. I think that's always been one of Pixar's biggest strengths. They managed to humanise inanimate objects, give them personalities, give them flaws, and that's something I just love in films in general, whenever they manage to make you feel for a non-human character and make them human. In this particular installment, the toys are forced to deal with the introduction of Forky to the gang, this white plastic spork that Bonnie has created in kindergarten. And he's going through something of an existential crisis, so it's pretty much up to Woody to try and teach him the virtues of being a toy, all while trying to keep him safe for Bonnie's sake. And the filmmakers managed to mine so much humour out of this, especially this montage where Forky keeps trying to throw himself in the bin and Woody has to constantly stop him from doing so. And there's this really funny, really catchy Randy Newman song that goes along with it too, which I adored. It's really damn funny. I like how the film does have a bit of an undercurrent of dark humour to it. Again, Pixar has always been pretty good at inserting wee adult jokes that the kids probably won't get, but the adults probably will. I mean, just look back at the first Toy Story, just look back at A Bug's Life, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But as for Forky, the character's a great new addition that does raise quite a lot of interesting questions about how did this thing come to life? Like, what is it that makes things come to life? And I'm glad the movie doesn't feel obliged to answer that, because it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it's a movie where toys come to life and talk and walk, so if a plastic spork can do it, I can buy it. The character of Forky is a great addition to the franchise, and I just absolutely loved him. Tony Hale as well is also fantastic in the part, and I genuinely loved the chemistry between Forky and Woody. I thought they played off against each other very nicely. I think they make for a very effective double act. But Forky isn't the only new addition to the series. Key and Peele are absolutely hysterically funny as this plush toy duo who are literally inseparable. And then you also have man of the moment Keanu Reeves as Duke Kaboom, this Canadian motorcyclist who's going through something of a crisis of confidence, and he also steals the film as he usually does. And then you also have Christina Hendricks as the film's antagonist, Gabby Gabby. And you're never really sure of her motivations, because for much of the movie she seems very affable and friendly, but you're sort of expecting her to be this real monster on the inside, almost like Lotso from the third movie, or Prospector from the second movie. And that's all I can really say about the character, because it is kind of going into spoiler territory if I mention anything else, but I can say that I really love the way they handled this particular character, if not much else. And yeah, the new characters are all certainly a blast, but at the same time, it is still a lot of fun to see much of the old gang back together. Woody and Buzz are easily one of the big screen's most iconic duos, going all the way back to the first film. Hanks and Alan have always worked very well together as a duo, and that's no exception in this film. There is quite a lot of screen time devoted to them, although Buzz is largely kind of downplayed for much of the movie. And that's honestly kind of my only real issue with the film. Most of the toys in the film do largely feel sidelined. Characters like Jesse, Bullseye, Ham, Slinky and Rex, they're all largely pushed into the background for much of the movie, and I suppose it is kind of a fitting metaphor that they spent much of their time in the backseat of an RV. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but it is a pretty fitting metaphor for how they're largely taking a backseat for this film. I guess that's understandable, and it's not really a huge issue because the story they're telling, it's so focused and succinct that I can very easily overlook it. Not to mention there is quite a few new characters, as well as a couple of characters returning from previous movies like Annie Potts' Bo Peep. So I guess it's only natural that certain characters will inevitably get sidelined. And then there's also the unfortunate case of Mr. Potato Head. As in case you didn't know, Don Rickles, the voice actor for Mr. Potato Head, tragically passed away in April 2017 before he could actually record any lines for this film. So that meant that they had to go through several archives of recordings from the first 3 films to see if there was any clips that they could use for this film. And it only really amounts to 2 or 3 lines overall, which is a bit unfortunate, but again, it's understandable. And I do want to take this time to pay tribute to Don Rickles and say, rest in peace. You were fantastic as Mr. Potato Head. You were absolutely stellar in the part. I mean, outside of Woody, Buzz and Jessie, I think Mr. Potato Head was easily my favourite character in the series, and Don Rickles was a major reason as to why. He really gave the character such humour and such life and such energy. That will never be forgotten. So kudos to you, Mr. Rickles. But as I said, downplaying of some of the importance of all the other toys, it's not that big of an issue and I can easily overlook it. So let's get back on track and talk about what else is great about the film. The movie feels very much focused on Woody as he's faced with his own dilemma. He's not being played by Bonnie anymore and is starting to feel kind of worthless as a result. There's a scene very early on where Woody's locked in a closet with these other toys voiced by Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Carol Burnett and Betty White in brief cameos. And the scene pretty much hammers home just how Woody is no longer the top dog and is starting to question his place in Bonnie's life. And that does add a lot of weight to his decision to help out Forky because he is directly responsible for Forky's safety and making sure that Bonnie is still happy. But at the same time, you do sort of question whether or not he's actually genuinely trying to help Bonnie and Forky, or whether he's just clinging to his memories of Andy and is struggling to be loved again. And that's ultimately, I think, one of the main themes of the movie. It's very much a story about finding your own place in the world, and I think it is very poignant in places. It sort of goes back to the second movie where Woody was sort of faced with the dilemma of whether or not to go back to Andy. And it's much more pushed to the forefront in this film. And I'm not going to say anything about how it's resolved, but it is genuinely pretty heartbreaking. This movie really is Woody's film. Even if that does mean a lot of the other characters do kind of take a bit of a backseat in this particular installment. But one character who definitely doesn't, and actually gets a much more prominent role than in previous films, is Annie Potts once again reprising her role as Bo Peep, who's very different from how she was depicted in the first two films, where she was just sort of seen as this love interest to Woody, and that was really kind of the only characterization that she got in those films. But here, she's reinvented herself as this highly resourceful, highly skilled survivalist type. And her return to the franchise is definitely a welcome one. I especially love her design in this film, especially how it acknowledges that even though she is a much more tougher, much more badass type of character, she is still at her core an ornament and can be fragile. Like, there's one funny moment where Woody accidentally tears off her arm and she just casually puts it back together with sticky tape. And it is also really damn funny too. Like, this is honestly one of the funniest movies that Pixar has ever made. I know in general Pixar are very good at balancing comedy and drama. Like, they can do it almost effortlessly without it coming across as disjointed or tonally inconsistent. And that skill really is on full display in this film. It's a very sharp, very confident and very witty film, and a lot of that comes through the animation and the writing. Especially from Reeves as Duke Kaboom and Key and Peele as Ducky and Bunny. There's a particularly great scene about halfway through the film where the toys are making a plan to save Forky. And I'm not saying anything else, but I will say that it's easily one of the funniest scenes that I've seen in any movie so far this year. And the animation in this film is just downright beautiful. It really just goes to show how far the Pixar has come along over the past 25 to 30 years as an animated studio. It's honestly kind of creepy just how detailed and beautiful the animated models and textures all look in this film, especially on Woody and Bo. The toys in this film genuinely look like they've come to life a lot of the time. And what's really impressive is that most of the time, there's like no uncanny valley or anything whatsoever. Usually whenever animated movies try to be realistic or lifelike with their designs, it really does tend to fall flat a lot of the time. But Toy Story 4 manages to pull it off almost effortlessly, to the point that I'm honestly more creeped out by just how realistic it looks. If you do get the chance to see this movie, please see it on the big screen because it is breathtaking. And in typical Pixar fashion, they do an absolutely fantastic job of tugging on the heartstrings without coming across as overly sentimental or cloying. All the emotional scenes in the film feel earned, especially in its final scenes, which I certainly won't spoil. But take my word for it, it is very heartbreaking and bittersweet. It's not nearly as sad or as gut-wrenching as Toy Story 3, and it is certainly a much more light-hearted film by comparison, but it does still pack an emotional punch. For a sequel that arguably had no reason to be made, Toy Story 4 manages to justify its existence even before its ending, which I would go so far as to say rivals Endgame in just how satisfying and emotionally gut-wrenching it really is. Overall, while I wouldn't quite say Toy Story 4 is my favourite film in the series, and I do think some of the supporting characters and some of the toys from previous movies are largely very underutilised and kind of wasted, it's another winner for Pixar that shows just how confident and how skilled they are, both as animators and as storytellers. With absolutely stunning animation and a story that manages to make you laugh, make you cry, tugs on the heartstrings and makes you feel excited just as much as any of the previous installments did. Those movies really set the bar tremendously high for any follow-up. But Toy Story 4 can definitely sit comfortably alongside them, even if it is the weakest of the four. And after all is said and done, I'm gonna give Toy Story 4 a strong 9 out of 10. As I've said before, this is definitely the weakest of the Toy Story films, but at the end of the day, that really speaks volumes to just how great this franchise is, that even the weakest installment is still better than many franchises could ever hope to be at their best. I really recommend seeing Toy Story 4 now that it's out in cinemas. And while I'm not really too sure about the prospect of future films, especially since this one does wrap things up quite nicely, if they're anywhere near as good as this, I'll definitely keep watching. For infinity and beyond. So Toy Story 4, have you seen it yet? If so, what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you once again for watching. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment. Maybe you can subscribe to my channel while you're at it. If there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, do let me know. I'm always happy to hear feedback as long as it's somewhat constructive. If you want to follow me on social media or support me on Patreon or check out my website, links are below down in the description. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.